And it's been a busy year. So we'll go through. Marilyn's going to throw a presentation up here, and we'll kind of go through that. I'll explain what our run of show is today, and we'll just dig into it. First of all, we'd like to give you a bit of an update for kind of what's been going on, excuse me, in the background and in the foreground. So we'll do that just briefly. And then we'll get into the main event today, which is to talk about the modifications that we're proposing to the use tables, use regulations, kind of the more I guess kind of back of house type stuff that's in the code, depending on how you look at things. So I also wanted to introduce, so Marilyn Allen is on here. She's our project manager, so you'll remember her from past meetings. Also, Mark White is on here. He's our main head lead consultant out of Kansas City. And Mark is both a city planner and an attorney. So he has a team working on this that they've been putting a lot of work into every aspect of the code, including what we're going to discuss today.
Let me just ask Jeff if everyone can see the presentation on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it just
Okay.
fine.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you all want to, there's a chat function, so we'll be watching the chat if you prefer to use that, or if you want to ask a question at any time, feel free to chime in or type it in or raise your virtual hand, however you want to do it. So with that, we'll get going, and I'll just kind of give you a brief update. So over the past couple of years, actually, we'll start with the sign code. As you know, that was adopted. We've been using that for some months now. And oh, hello. Oh, sorry. So we've been using that for some months now, and it's working well. We've, as with any new code, there are a few little polishing modifications. We've got kind of a list of things we want to tweak, minor stuff. So that's kind of how we roll. So that is done. We just recently adopted a home sharing revision, which took a lot of effort. That's part of the code update. Something that was kind of had to be prioritized. Some things just kind of develop a life of their own, become more urgent. So that's something that was recently adopted by council. So what that does is it gives a limitation on the number or the percentage or number either way of home sharing units on any given block or any given part of the city, and make some important revisions. So and then we have also the accessory dwelling ordinance that's currently under consideration. Sorry, I was trying to get my notes here. So the accessory dwellings ordinance, what we did, so as we were working on the urban medium zones, and you probably see this little postage stamp here on the right, should look familiar to all, as we were working through the urban medium update and developing that code. An important part of that is accessory dwellings, and we went through that with you all some time ago, and we felt people felt good about that. We had good support for it from surveys, and across the country, that's often something that cities do to kind of a leader in hey, this is code update, and this is a change that we can make to get us closer to our objective. So we went ahead and moved forward with that separately, because there are some things like the sign code we've already done, and also like home sharing and accessory dwellings. There are some things that are kind of standalone enough that we could go ahead and update, and it would take minimal effort when the new code is adopted to kind of integrate it all. So we went ahead and moved forward with that. And you may have seen some press about that. It's so just in terms of context for our metro area, our central Oklahoma area, we're not the first to do that. Edmond, Norman have ordinances that are fairly recent, adopting accessory dwellings, at least in portions of their cities, similar to us. Tulsa does as well. But we want to get it right for our community, of course. So we proposed the ordinance, and there were several neighborhoods, including historic preservation. Well, that historic preservation itself, that actual zoning district was not in the ordinance because the ordinance was limited to R1, R2, R3, and R4, not HP. So where we are now, we've heard a lot of feedback from various neighborhood leaders, and in response to that, we've made some compromises in the ordinance, done a few things to address concerns about privacy, height, parking, and some other things. So the ordinance right now has those compromises in it, and the Planning Commission sent it on to City Council. City Council heard it late last year. They had some comments, which we'll be discussing and starting up again. So we'll go back to council on February 11th. So that's where that is at. Let's see.
Hey, Jeff, Todd has a question, I think.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. I was just going to actually try to send a chat message so you didn't have to stop. But it's been a long time. So just clarifying question, is the ADUs, are they going to be allowed in this ordinance across the different zoning areas, or is it just going to be in this particular area? And I forget the zoning classification.
Yeah, so they're proposed to be allowed in the urban medium areas.
Urban medium.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So as you recall, the comprehensive plan has that kind of light brown area that's essentially the inner loop. So I-44 to I-235 down to roughly to I-240, kind of that central area of the city.
Okay.
So that's what's proposed right now. And the reason, there are several reasons we limited it to that area. But mostly it's like, well, that's because that's the zoning, that's the area of the city we're focused on, that getting the zoning right for that area. So that's what we're focused on for the accessory dwellings.
Do you see this going out into the, urban reserve or rural areas, or?
So we will have that discussion, and it remains to be seen what people, what the preferences are. Some of the council members that represent suburban and rural areas have said, well, hey, wouldn't we want to do that? So we will definitely be addressing that. But having an accessory dwelling in a rural area is a lot different than having it in urban medium. You're farther away from your neighbors. Concerns are just different. So it makes sense that we would address that separately and have different rules. So that has always been our intent. This is a context-based zoning code, and so we want to make sure that we get it right for each area of the city, get it tailor-made to each area of the city.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, yeah, good question. Thank you. So yeah, urban medium based zones, we've been working on those, and we continue to kind of test those against what cases are coming in. And it really works. And so we're kind of excited about the potential that it has. So we don't have any, there's no, I guess, news for you on that. We'll come back to you at some point with maybe some adjustments to that, but for the most part, it's looking good. So other things that we're working on include all the other parts of the code. So parking, landscaping, building and site design, compatibility, of course, what we're talking about today, the use and use standards and just the uses and where they're permitted and how they're permitted. That side of sort of nuts and bolts is what we'll be talking about today. And then, so yeah, I mentioned parking already. That's actually, so that's coming soon. So we'll be having a study session on January 23rd with the Planning Commission, just to kind of introduce because it's a bit different, the approach that we're taking. This is one of those areas where we'll be incorporating best practices, and it relates to some of the concerns that we have in our, today versus 20, 30, 40 years ago. And one of those is heat. So this is kind of it's related to a recent study session we have the Planning Commission, kind of building on that. We'll be talking about that. And of course, we'll be bringing the parking ordinance and all of these thoughts to the stakeholder advisory team coming soon as well. Building design I mentioned, so that's under development. We've got some focus groups that we'll be putting together, both for that and for landscaping and open space. Want to get landscape architects to opine on that, on those things. So you should be seeing more of us. That's our hope. So 2025 will be an important year for this project. So I think with that, Marilyn, I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and if there are any questions for me, we'll take those now. Otherwise, we'll turn it over to Marilyn. So any questions before we proceed to the main event today?
I don't see any, so y'all, thanks. Thanks for hanging in there with us and getting back to the band back together. We will need your help a lot in 2025. We just worked a lot in 2024 on these uses and all those design sections to try and get an order of operations, really. So y'all will be the ones that it'll go to next to talk about the content and all that. So we're just trying to get it tied up into a neat package so it's going to be easy for y'all and the public to review. And Mark's, of course, in the background writing away. So we work really closely with his team. So I know uses aren't, the most sexiest, topic, but as a planner, the definitions and the uses and the use regulations are really kind of the skeleton of the code. And it's pretty detailed, but a lot of what we do in PUDs and SPUDs and stuff that comes up is about uses. And that's what the zoning code was originally created for, is where does the uses go? So when I talk about, why are we making any changes to this section, what the goals, kind of go over the changes a little bit. There's tons and tons of uses. We can't really talk about any today, kind of examples. But I want you to get the instructions on how to get started with commenting on this kind of bear of a section. So why do we need to change any of our uses? Way back in 2017, we had another firm do a code diagnosis, and top 10 items was your uses are outdated, narrowly defined, and creating some issues. These are just some examples. Like when scooters came to town, it seems we have a lot of these, drive-through only things now, but it was kind of a new thing a few years ago. And we're just getting more and more of these drive-through only things. It seems to be where the fast food industry is going. But our fast food category, this is just an example, has this word and. You have to have indoor and outdoor service. So when they came into permit, we spent weeks trying to figure out which use they were, and so that's why it's like too specific why do you have to have indoor and outdoor service? And then I don't know if you remember, some of you remember when we used to go stand out line, stand out or all night to wait to get the concert tickets. So a ticket office was something that was quite a, maybe had a lot of nuisance uses, so we put that under this personal services general. Some uses were too specific. Like we have this whole thing called business support services, which is like employment agencies. I don't know if back in the day they were something different, but isn't that just an office? Do we need a separate category for that? So that's like a specificity kind of thing. A lot of what we do that slows down permits is trying to, square peg round hole into these new uses. It can take a couple of weeks trying to figure out which use they are, and then like this is Home Depot. They're not your little Ace Hardware anymore, but they're sort of tucked in under retail sales because retail sales isn't maybe specific enough to say, hey, you're not retail sales anymore. If you're going to do all this kind of stuff outside, you're becoming construction sales. So things like that. These are just examples. Here's my two favorite ones. Video arcades and health clubs. I was saying that I remember we had this girl in high school that used to run all over the streets, and we thought she was insane. Why is she running? Why is she jogging? What is that? We didn't. And so health clubs were kind of seen as we didn't know what they were. We sort of tucked them into participant recreation indoor. They're not allowed in many uses. We had to do a whole PUD revision because Orange Theory wanted to come into the Sprouts on 122nd and MacArthur, and gyms weren't allowed because it was those weird health club, muscle people. Same with video arcades. Those were those kids that were hanging out and creating problems. Now they're in your upstairs, upstairs playing video games. So it just kind of changes in uses. And here's my favorite, and I'll give any of you a gold star or something else. That's if you can tell me what personal training, mailing facilities, ticket offices, tattoo parlors, massage services, and tag agencies have in common, because that's all one use. And from a planning standpoint, those are not completely different uses, but they were kind of a category we threw everything in that we didn't like into as things came up. So modernizing uses, that's why part of the reason we need it. And then there's missing uses. We've had several PUD and SPUDs that were event centers and rooftop event centers. We don't really have a use. You kind of have to cobble together, participant recreation and entertainment and outdoor stuff to get an event center. And there's no, use regulations or anything for those. And then of course we got our composting. We sort of have a mini use for it, but we don't have enough specificity in that definition to tell us what that is. So when we did a little study back before COVID on what, when we were working on the code update, what are people varying in these PUDs and SPUDs? Well, uses is 2/3 of all PUDs. This isn't related to SPUDs, but it's probably the same. 2/3 of all PUDs are about uses. So we can see that they're creating problems. One thing is we put dispensary in retail sales. So when someone asks for retail sales, we get to go round and round about the dispensary. There's this auto storage use, which the way it's defined means that if I'm a business and I have a fleet of vehicles out in the parking lot, it gets defined as auto storage. Drive-throughs, those come up in PUDs and SPUDs all the time. We're trying to, get the call boxes away from residential, basically. Custom manufacturing is something that's in industrial, but everybody wants to add to a C3 zone. Commercial, they want it to be commercial. High and moderate impact institutional. This is a funny one. We had a flight training school that came in. They wanted to add a flight training center. They they were going to give the students a college credit for that course. And so somebody, decided that the way the code read, and the building permit guys are really good about, they interpret it like it's read, like it's whatever we put in there is what they interpret it. That because they were receiving a college credit, it all of a sudden became something, high impact institutional like a college. So, too specific. Microbrewery is also one. We don't really have a use for that, and people always want to add that to commercial zones. We have this thing called laundry services. Well, now mostly laundry services is just a little pickup, drop-off store that's more like a personal service. And so when someone adds laundry service to a PUD or something, you could get also like the big plant. And so need to separate those to modernize that use. Industrial light. Some of the uses seem in that category are heavier, and some are lighter, and some are more like an office. So kind of an update of that use as well. And we nickel and dime these in PUDs and SPUDs all the time. So the goals obviously are to modernize uses. We want faster permitting. We don't want to discuss, is it a college or not a college? We want less PUDs and SPUDs related to uses. We want, easy to use, more user-friendly, being able to find things faster, and just enhance also the use regulations, and I'll explain the difference between the definitions and the regulations as we go. Yes, we're still going to have use tables, and I know for some of you it's a little hard to review the uses without knowing where they're going to go. This is just an example, but we'll still have this, but we're going to work on the definitions and the regulations first, because we don't even have all these zones. Like Todd was saying, we don't have, rural low and rural medium and even urban low yet. We haven't reviewed those. So we'll still have the same use table. We'll still assign whether it's a special permit, permitted, conditional use, all these things. So we'll still have this, but we're not here yet. We'll get this. This will be the next step. Okay, so use definitions. These right now are called Article 8 use unit classifications. And how did we come up with changes? Marilyn doesn't know a lot about some of these uses. Mark knows from a legal standpoint about some of the uses. We've had PUDs and SPUDs every other week where we talk about these different uses and the implications. So what informed these changes? So planning commission solutions over the years that, like for drive-throughs and drive-throughs near residential, we've said got to be 150 feet from the call box from residential. So why not codify that? The staff efforts over the years to interpret, what they are and what the issues are. And we really worked, that's what took a long time to get this ready, was we worked with the building permit and the code enforcement and public works to go through every single one of these uses. And they told us all the different problems they have. You as the technical advisors on the team may have also had problems that you could let us know about interpreting uses or regulations. And so they helped us immensely and went through every, scenario that they've dealt with. And then finally, we urban agriculture and composting is something, we want in the city. We know it has caused a lot of, especially composting, a lot of, PUD and SPUD meetings. And so we called together a focus group of folks. They were very helpful, and they read through all the they helped us with all the definitions and all the use regulations, including the state agencies that review them. So that was really great. So that's just not coming out of nowhere. That's from our focus group folks. Thank you to them. So currently we have 146 uses, and I wish we could say, well, we quashed them down to 50 and we're good, but it doesn't work that way. So we were able to combine more than 20 uses. So that's good. And 44 of the 124 are kind of modernized language to help us interpret them more easily. We did add 15 new uses like this cottage court. And then, we don't even have a use for Amazon fulfillment centers. We had a Kroger come in recently where nobody's going to go to the Kroger. Is it a grocery store? What is it? So we've added thing about, distribution fulfillment centers. And then finally, there's this Article 12, which is called Site Development Standards. And Sarah Welch is not on the call, but she calls this the junk drawer. That drawer that you put everything in and you just keep stuffing it in, and it doesn't have any categories or anything. Over the years in Article 12, we put a lot of stuff that came up new, like, satellite dishes and wind energy systems, and we've just kept adding things in there, and it's just gotten really unwieldy and hard to find stuff. So we moved some of that stuff over into this uses section, and Mark spent a lot of time, reorganizing that, and it's to me, it's a lot easier to find what you're looking for now. So these are just kind of the highlight of changes. There's a lot more than this, but things that we combined or modified. Manufactured housing kind of will have a different approach we're proposing. We'll come back to you and explain all that. But kind of manufactured housing is sort of turned into a use instead of a zone like we have now. Restaurants, we combined all the different eating establishments together. And then drive-through and restaurant patios, it would be like an accessory use. So I can have a restaurant pretty much, lots of places, but can I have a drive-through in certain zones? Yes, maybe yes or no. And I would have metrics. If it's a separate use, I can just have metrics for drive-throughs. Construction sales, I was telling you about that. We kind of come up with where, Mark was a big help on this, where if your outdoor display exceeds 10% of your building space, then you're all of a sudden not retail sales anymore. You're a construction sales, and still allowed. Wherever it's allowed, you can still do it, but there may be places where retail sales is allowed and construction sales is not allowed. Accessory structures and equipment, that was a big part of the Article 12. We moved that over into it's completely reorganized. I think Mark did a great job in that. It's really hard. So now you can quickly go into a table and find what I'm allowed to do with accessory structures and equipment. Industrial, we had 3 categories: light, moderate, and heavy, high heavy. And we kind of split those into 2 categories. So sort of light, moderate stuff that's kind of okay places, and then heavy hazardous stuff that's needs a little more site issues with dangerous things that can blow up and things like that. Surface goods, like I said, we kind of massage this truck freight thing so we can get fulfillment centers in. And then urban ag, we also streamline that. So we have 3 types. And we'll be able to go into that maybe, at a different meeting. Completely new uses are event centers, marijuana dispensaries, and processing and grow operations. We never had a use for those. We just sort of threw them into different uses. Microbrewery, what is that? How many gallons can you produce and stuff? Compost facilities, we never had a use. We just have this sort of generic composting use, and there's sort of levels of composting. I'll show you that in a minute. Food service, so drive-through only. The other kind of new trend is these ghost kitchens, where if Uber Eats and all those people are going to pick up items, some of the restaurants are getting together and creating kind of an industrial sort of operation. Each one of them has like a little cooking space. Maybe they cook limited things, and then Uber can come there and pick up the stuff rather than going to interrupting the services at the restaurant. So that's kind of a new thing that's happening, but there's no customers coming in. It's just kind of this food service use. We sort of separated universities, high schools out of this kind of conglomerate, high impact institutional. The same with elementary schools and religious institutions. They, since Mark is an attorney, it helps us with, Supreme Court cases. There's certain things about religious institutions that may be different from elementary schools. So we separated those uses and added, a new religious institution use. And then we have two new types of dwellings that we would like to see: cottage courts and townhomes. We didn't really have a use for those before, and how's that's defined. Use regulations. I'm kind of trying to go through this a little bit fast so we have time to have discussion, but use regulations, these are what we call Article 9. Only about half of the uses have use regulations, and it's where we need a little more detail about you can have the use. Right now it's called conditional C in the tables, and so you can have the use, but you got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in order to do it. So this is kind of just I'll go through the composting example just to show you kind of what the issues are in some of these uses. So we do have a composting use. We have a composting use regulation. Here it is, 9350.21.1. And it pretty much says, in residential districts, got to be in the backyard, no insects, no odors, no running off into waterways. Well, that's okay maybe for your backyard operation over here on the left. But what about, I get something bigger and now I'm getting like industrial type levels of composting. There's no distinction between any of these three, right? And so that's why we go to PUD and SPUD, and then we start talking about, poop and all the dyes, and it gets kind of crazy. So the new one would sort of look like this, where it would be, this would be a composting facility, which would be a new use. We don't have that for these bigger operations. And how much cubic yards can I have? How far do they have to be away from residential? How far do they have to be away from water wells? How far do they have to be away from water bodies? And then we have like accessory uses. So if I want to do it in my backyard, go ahead. But if you get to be 20 cubic yards, you're something else. And code enforcement can come say, hey, you're getting a little too big. How far does my composting bin have to be from my neighbor? 10 feet. Can I do it in a community garden? Sure. But once you get to be past 50 cubic yards, you're becoming something bigger and you need a different, permission for that. And how far do I have to be from residential zones and all these things? Accessory and agricultural composting. So we have, as you can see, way more metrics to help us decide where these should go. And then, all kinds of information about who's permitting these things. It turns out that on the manure kind, ODAF, which is Oklahoma Department of Agriculture and Forestry, I may not be getting that right. I can't see my notes, but they have to permit anything that relates to manure. And so just like the alcohol regulations, the state comes in and they do a lot of regulating that's above and beyond what we would even do. But you can see any ones that require ODAF approval shall be permitted only in where these uses are permitted. So we try to tamp that down. We try and be really specific on what's allowed where. So we still have around the same amount of use regulations, but we deleted some, we moved some from that Article 12 I was telling you about, and then we added some new ones. And as you'll go through some of these, as you look at all these different review areas that, why did we delete some? Some we deleted, there's ones in gray, because once we fixed the definition, we sort of changed the definition, then we didn't need the use, the stuff that was talked about in the use anymore, or we have these new zone patterns. We have all these design regulations now, site design, buffering, landscape buffering, and all this. So whatever the concern was in that use regulation wouldn't be a concern anymore because it's covered in another part of the code. The reasons, of course, for adding is either it's a new use or we transferred from another part of the code. Well, the blue ones, we all transferred from another part of the code, except all these ones were in the code. They just transferred and updated. And then all the green ones we added, like solar farm. We didn't have a use regulation for how do you set up a solar farm and how big can it be, just like the composting. So I made you a cheat sheet or Cliff Notes, whatever you want to call it. This you will not find in code to review, but I wanted you to be able to compare side by side the definitions. So you'll see the first column on the left, and I sent this in the email. You can print it out, you can write on it, use it for your reference. But so the first column on the left is the new name of what it is. The second column is the new definition or description. And then the third column is what it is currently, and then our current number for it. And if you see black text, that means exactly the same as now. If you see blue text, that means that that it's pretty much similar, but we updated the language a little bit, but didn't really change the use too much, but we changed that. Yeah, like we added training schools in here, so we don't have to deal with high impact institutional for training anymore. If it's green, that means a totally new use. It wasn't in there before. And then the red text, reason for change is why we changed it. And then burnt orange, I have a Longhorn, so I figured it was only fair to do burnt orange for the use reg. That tells you whether there's a use reg or not. You could go in the other PDF or in the other section and say, oh, okay, let's see what the use regs say now. But if it was the same, like for aircraft, it's pretty much the same as it was, and I give you the section number that it is now. So you can go, oh, okay, I see it's pretty much the same. So just so you'll know. So this is your cheat sheet document. If you want to make comments on this document, handwrite stuff, totally fine. You can come back and print it out and turn it into me with handwritten notes. That's what we can interpolate them into encode if you don't want to do that. This is easier for you to work with. So in encode, and I'll show you this in a minute. So here's the use definitions are going to look like this by alphabet. And if you want to talk about religious institution, you'll hit R. I'll show you this in a minute. And then you'll hit religious institution and you'll be able to comment on that definition, like, oh, you left out the word and, or we need to revise this like this. So you'll be able to comment on each use. Now, I'll show you, but these are not only uses, these are also definitions of things. So you can comment on those too, but they're all kind of mixed together, which is why this cheat sheet is good, because, okay, I'm going to go comment on this use. But something like rafter, that's not here. That's not use. That's just a definition. So you can still comment on it. You can look at rafter and say, oh, it's always been a problem how they've defined rafter. But that's also, so definitions and uses are all in the same section now. And then the same with use regulations. You'll be able to go to that use regulations and click, say, like childcare centers, and read it and make a whole your comment on those. So let's go. See if I can go. Come on. Okay. So you'll remember, some of you, that we reviewed the urban medium zones, and they're still here. You can go back and read these too, because this is more the latest and greatest. After, see all your comments down here, they're still there. Here's all your comments that you made, and I tried to respond to those. So if you want to go back and review some of those and look through the different what's happened since you reviewed it, the comments, these comments are not going to match what's at the top now anymore, because this is how we changed based on your comments and based on other people's comments. So this is kind of the latest and greatest. So you can still go and review the urban medium zones. So I'm up here at the top. There's this kind of good quick reference thing. If you want to view the definitions, under A, it'll give you all, you can see them all the A's, but if you want to go to above ground flammable liquid storage and read what that definition, but the reason I gave you the cheat sheet is because it doesn't have the blue and the green and the red text in here. This is what will be the real thing. So you can't see what was changed, but this is the way you can comment. You can open the box, put your name, and then your the email that was given, that you gave to us when you signed up for the SAT. If your email has changed, let me know and we can change your email, but you need to use the email that you gave originally, so that or that's in the system now, or otherwise it won't go anywhere. And then you make your comment, I think we ought to change the word capacity, blah, 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 and then you hit submit. And then it'll go at the bottom of this section. I'll be able to see your comment. Everyone else will be able to see your comment. You can have a conversation about, hey, I had to deal with this. And so add comments. Here's the comment instructions. You've seen this before, but now it's sort of tailored to this, this exercise. Just what I just showed you about how to go to the comment box, how to submit your comment, your name and email, and then hit submit. So all of these little buttons are for you at the top to go to the section that you want to review. If you do want to, if you want to send me emails, if you want to do it on paper, happy to take it. However, is more comfortable for you to provide comments. So kind of what we're looking for from y'all is, are the uses described thoroughly enough? Could we combine more uses, or do we need to separate more uses? Have we covered everything? I'm afraid in 30 years, people will be laughing at us too, because there was things we didn't know were coming. Just a couple of months ago, we had a case for these they're called BESS, battery energy storage systems. We didn't have a use for that. We were trying to figure out what to do with it. Is it flammable? What is it? So if there's things that we're not covering, I'm afraid there's gonna be all kinds of things with drones that we're not covering. But if you know of anything that we should look at, Mark's really good at researching what other cities are doing and what the law is saying. So we can add things there. Is there any wording that may have affected you on a permit? You're like, this one use, you didn't fix what the problem was. Same with PUDs and SPUDs. Have we fixed the problems in these use regulations? Are they clear? So we would love to get this all done by March, but this was already a year effort for staff. It's a lot of uses and a lot of regulations. So we can talk about this timeline, but it would be nice if we could move on to other things and we could release these out to the public. Who a lot of other people may have opinions on these things. So the discussion kind of want to open up to y'all is, how should we do this? Do y'all want, we could do it by topic and have little lunch and learn, 1 hour speed things about, residential uses or whatever. We could, and do you like this online format? Would you rather meet, have a little lunch session, meet either here or Community Foundation, something or like that? Or would you rather have fewer meetings in larger chunks and talk about different things? I found it useful to just talk about residential uses in one day and not get mixed up with commercial uses, say, or agricultural uses, because it gets to be a lot of topics in one session. So that's what we're trying to get from y'all today. How are we going to get through these sections? open up to you guys. Stop sharing.
Marilyn, can you hear me?
Yes.
In terms of how we go forward, I do think the sort of hour-long meetings are probably the right way to go. It's just, people have such other things they've got to try to take care of. I'm much more of an in-person meter, as you know, but I have no problem with it being online like this. This seems to be very manageable. People can kind of be as engaged as they want or need to be. Um, but I think more meetings that cover less ground each would probably be helpful. It is a lot to hold in your brain and to go from one to the next. At some point, we'll probably have to have one or more meetings where we try to smush it all together. But I think that this is probably a pretty good format, at least from what I observe of both myself and other people's habits.
I will say that I mean, there's a lot here, and this comment applies to this current kind of module in front of us, but also anything like there's a lot here to review, and we will take whatever we can get from you. So if you want to focus, if you don't have time to focus on every single use and every single word, I get it. But if you want to focus on the things that you're most familiar with and give us some comments on that, that would be really appreciated. I know we're very needy. We ask a lot of you guys, and we just keep asking. So, but we really need and appreciate your feedback. So, but even just one comment on one use is going to be valuable to us. So if you can just, if you want to, of course, it'd be great if you can go through every single use and every single detail. But we will take what we can get from you all, especially those things that you're most familiar with and interested in. So it'll all be appreciated.
And you could always, like, if you get tripped up, I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole and talk about one use for like over an hour, believe me. And some of them get legal, we have to bring in Mark because there's like legal implications on some of these stuff. And so if you also want to email me and say, I really want to just have a meeting on these 5 things, these are really like, we need to talk about these, that we can also do it that way. But topic is good too, because then you get your kind of brain focused on either the commercial ones are really the big ones. I mean, those are the ones that affect most of the city. Some of the architects may have, opinions on the residential ones or, but I mean, there's also civic uses too, like homeless shelters and all that stuff that we need to discuss as well. But the commercial ones are really the ones where I'm hoping y'all will help us make sure they look good. And industrial.
Yeah. Well, I was going to kind of generally agree with Janice's point, but it without kind of getting into it and digging in a little bit first, it's hard for me to say like how much of a chunk can we bite off, and so getting the ball rolling and starting with what we can, and seeing how far we get in a meeting is sooner than later is a good approach, I think. So I'm pretty open, but I'd like to just take it away and read through everything in detail before I can have a better sense of how much input I can even, I would offer and this and that. So I appreciate all the intro. Because I'm often dealing with remote consultants and remote projects and this and that, I'm on Teams all the time. So it works very well for me and saves me travel time. But I do appreciate the value of face-to-face meetings. So maybe we have kind of a little bit of both. And see, I also like to have my screen right in front of my my eyes sometimes too on the side. So I can see the value in doing some Teams and then some in person. That's kind of all I have to offer at the moment.
And sort of what I'm hoping is that this will kind of be going on in the background, because I mean, 150 uses and 80 use that this could sort of keep churning as we move to parking and landscaping and other things at like in-person meetings. But this, I was hoping we could just sort of, hey, we're going to cover these 10 uses today. If you have any interest, hop on, or maybe, something like that. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, any other,
thoughts? Let's see. Ophelia has a comment, but she's muted.
I think she was giving a thumbs up, so,
Oh, thumbs up. Okay.
um,
Okay.
okay.
Y'all want to kind of dive in? What I'll do is I'm gonna send you these slides so you'll have the links, and I'm gonna send you, I didn't send you the use regulations PDF because I didn't want you to get too overwhelmed at one time, but I'll send you that. All of this too will also be on your SAT website, which I'll send the link to that too, and the recording of this meeting for people who couldn't be here. So I don't know if y'all want to email me back and say, hey, it looks like, these uses seem ones I'd like to talk about more, or you can talk to Mark White about certain uses. If you have, we can set you up with different people to talk about the uses, or you can just call me on the phone and say, hey, how did we get to this place?
Marilyn, I was just giving a thumbs up that I like the doing this portion virtually and as
Okay.
needed in person. For me, I can just literally walk to the place because we're close by. But I think just being able to like know what uses are going to be in discussion, and we can determine to hop on or not, since we'll have a chance to kind of review ones that are, we're most familiar with or that we're interested in, and then we can hop on the ones that perhaps we feel like we want to add some input in person, so
Okay.
or virtually. Yep.
Yeah, because I'll begin to see your comments, and you may want to put in there, hey, go into encode and say, hey, we need to, I don't understand this one, or we need to talk about this one more, or something. You can just always put that in encode. So.
Just so I'm clear, in what you were saying, Marilyn, was we want to try to complete this process if possible by the 3rd of March. As a, that's not like a first round. That's a let's try to get through this at a quicker pace than in the next 6-8 weeks, basically.
And we'll have to see, like, are there tons and tons of questions about certain things? If we ran into problems, it's not like we have to meet that, but it would be great to finish this and be able to focus on the other things, other sections. And it's kind of up to y'all what y'all think. If you're like, no way, this is going to take forever. We need another couple of months, or that's fine.
To be determined.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything. I have to hop off for another meeting. So
Thanks for coming.
I'm gonna duck out, but thank you all very much, and I'll check the emails and take a look at those links. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else? We'll always have this contact information, and I'll send you the website where all this will be posted, and print it out, mark it up, any other thing, Mark or Jeff, thoughts?
no, I appreciate everybody and your participation up to this point. It's been valuable, and we continue to appreciate your support and review of all these detailed documents. So thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
We'll talk
thank
to y'all
you.
later.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.